Hello and welcome back to another reading of My Father's Dragon. Yesterday we ended with our main character in the bottom of a ship. He was sailing off to try and find a place called Wild Island. He brought with him some very strange things like 12 lollipops and rubber bands and a hairbrush, and he brought peanut butter sandwiches and apples. And I asked you to tell me on Seesaw what you would bring with you if you were going on a big trip. Well, my friend Lillian replied back, and she said she would bring a toothbrush and toothpaste. She would also bring a book to read, a journal to write in, and a pencil, which I thought was a really good idea. She would bring a warm blanket, and she would also bring a stuffy. So, let's see what happens in the story today. Here we go. My Father's Dragon's Words to Know. Cargo, goods carried on a ship, a train, or plane. Hold, it's the bottom of a ship where they keep food and other items. Merchant, someone who sells or trades items. Steam shovel, an excavator that is powered by steam. Invasion, when someone or something unwanted comes in. There was an invasion of ants. Chapter 3. My Father Finds the Island. My father hid in the hold for 6 days and nights. Twice he was nearly caught when the ship stopped to take on more cargo. But at last he heard a sailor say that the next port would be Cranberry, and that they would be unloading the wheat there. My father knew that the sailors would send him home if they caught him, so he looked in his knapsack and took out a rubber band and an empty grain bag with the label that said Cranberry. At the last moment, my father got inside the bag, knapsack and all, folded the top of the bag inside, and put the rubber band around the top. He didn't look exactly like the other bags, but it was the best he could do. Soon the sailors came to unload. They lowered a big net into the hold, and they began moving the bags of wheat. Suddenly, one sailor yelled, "Great Scott! This is the weirdest bag of wheat I've ever seen. It's all lumpy-like. But the label says it's gotta go to Cranberry." The other sailors looked at the bag too, and my father, who was in the bag, of course, tried even harder to look like a bag of wheat. Then another sailor felt the bag, and he just so happened to get a hold of my father's elbow. "Oh, I know what this is," he said. "This is a bag of dried corn on the cob." And then he dumped my father into the big net along with the bags of wheat. This all happened in the late afternoon, so late that the merchant in Cranberry who had ordered this wheat did not count his bags until the next morning. He was a very punctual man and never was late for dinner. The sailors told the captain, and the captain wrote down on a piece of paper that they had delivered 160 bags of wheat and 1 bag of dried corn on the cob. They left the piece of paper for the merchant and sailed away that evening. My father heard later that the merchant spent the whole next day counting and recounting those bags and feeling each one of the bags to try and find the dried corn on the cob, which he never found, because as soon as it was dark, my father climbed out of the bag, folded it up, and put his back in his knapsack. He walked along the shore to a nice sandy place, and then he laid down to sleep. My father was very hungry when he woke up the next morning. Just as he was looking to see if he had anything left to eat in his knapsack, something hit him on the head. It was a tangerine. He had been sleeping right under a tree full of big, fat tangerines. And then he remembered. He was on the island of Tangerina. Tangerine trees grew wild everywhere. My father picked as many as he had room for, which was 31, and then he started off to find Wild Island. He walked and walked and walked along the shore, looking for the rocks that joined the 2 islands. He walked all day, and once, when he met a fisherman, and he asked him about Wild Island, but the fisherman began to shake and couldn't talk for a long time. It scared him that much, just thinking about it. Finally, he said, "Many people have tried to explore Wild Island, but no one has come back alive. We think they were eaten by the wild animals." This didn't bother my father. He kept walking and he slept on the beach again that night. It was a beautiful, clear day. the next day, and way down the shore my father could see a long line of rocks leading out into the ocean. And way out at the end, he could just see a tiny patch of green. He quickly ate 7 tangerines and started down the beach. It was almost dark when he finally came to the rocks, but there, way out in the ocean, was a patch of green. So he sat down and he rested a while, and he remembered what the cat had told him. She had said, "If you can, go out into the island at night, because that is when the wild animals won't see you coming along the rocks. You can hide when you get there." So my father picked 7 more tangerines, put on his black rubber boots, and waited for dark. It was a very black night, and my father could hardly see the rocks ahead of him. Sometimes they were quite high, and sometimes the waves almost covered them, and they were slippery and hard to walk on. Sometimes the rocks were far apart, and my father had to get a running start and leap from one to the next. After a while, he began to hear a rumbling noise. It got louder and louder as he got nearer to the island. At last, it seemed as if he was right on top of that noise, and he was. He had jumped from a rock onto the back of a small whale who was fast asleep and cuddled up between 2 other rocks. The whale was snoring and making more noise than a steam shovel. It was so it never even heard my father say, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." It never knew my father had jumped on its back by mistake. For 7 hours my father climbed and slipped and leapt from rock to rock, but while it was still dark, he finally reached the last rock and stepped off onto Wild Island. Chapter 4. My father finds the river. The jungle began just beyond a narrow strip of beach. Thick, dark, damp, scary jungle. My father hardly knew where to go, so he crawled under a wahoo bush to think, and he ate 8 tangerines. The first thing to do, he decided, was to find the river, because the dragon was tied somewhere along its bank. Then he thought, if the river flows into the ocean, I ought to be able to find it quite easily if I just walk along the beach far enough. So my father walked until the sun rose, and he was quite far from the ocean rocks. It was very dangerous to stay near them, because they might be guarded in the daytime. He found a clump of tall grass and sat down. Then he took off his rubber boots and he ate 3 more tangerines. He could have eaten 12, but he hadn't seen any tangerines on this island, and he could not risk running out of something to eat. My father slept all that day and woke up late in the afternoon when he heard a funny little voice saying, "Weird, what a dear little duck. Dear, what a weird little rock." My father saw a tiny paw rubbing itself on his knapsack. He lay very still, and the mouse, for that is what it was, hurried away, muttering to itself, "I must smell somebody. I must tell somebody." My father waited a few minutes and then started down the beach, because it was almost dark now, and he was afraid that mouse would tell somebody what it saw. He walked all night, and 2 scary things happened. First, he just had to sneeze. So he did, and somebody close by said, "Is that you, monkey?" My father said, "Yes." Then the voice said, "You must have something on your back, monkey." And my father said, "Yes," because he did. He had his knapsack on his back. "What do you have on your back, monkey?" asked the voice. My father didn't know what to say, because what would a monkey have on its back, and how would it sound telling someone about it if it did have something? Just then there was another voice, and it said, "I bet you're taking your sick grandmother to the doctor's." My father said, "Yes," and hurried on. Quite by accident, he found out later that he had been talking to a pair of tortoises. The second thing that happened was that he nearly walked right between 2 wild boars who were talking in a low, solemn whisper. When he first saw the dark shapes, he thought they were just big boulders. Just in time, he heard one of them say, "There are 3 signs of a recent invasion. First, fresh tangerine peels were found under the wahoo bush near the ocean rocks. Second, a mouse reported an extraordinary rock some distance from the ocean rocks, which upon further investigation simply was not there. However, more fresh tangerine peels were found in that same spot, which is the third sign of an invasion. Since tangerines do not grow on our island, somebody must have brought them across the ocean rocks from the other island, which may or may not have something to do with the appearance and or disappearance of that extraordinary rock reported by Mouse. After a very long silence, the other boar said,
You know, I think we're taking this all too seriously. Those peels probably floated over here all by themselves. And you know how unreliable mice are. Besides, if there had been an invasion, I would have seen it.
Perhaps you're right, said the first boar. Shall we retire? Whereupon they both trundled back into the jungle. Well, that taught my father a lesson. And after that, he saved all of his tangerine peels in his knapsack. He walked all night, and toward morning he came to the river. But that is when his troubles really began. And I'm afraid that is the end of chapter 4. Tomorrow I'll be reading you chapters 5 and 6. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas about what the next troublesome thing could be that will happen to our main character. Do you think he's going to get caught? Do you think maybe he'll find the dragon and just have trouble freeing him? I'd love to know what you predict. Please message me on Seesaw and tell me what you think. Have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.